بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوكل عليه ربنا سبحانه وتعالى ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Ayat that we're going to deal with is an ayat in the book of Allah Azza wa Jal that describes the condition of many of the Muslims today. And the reason why we're choosing this ayat is to encourage you to do the opposite of what the ayat is saying, and to also see the danger of being described by what the ayat is saying. And the ayat is talking about something that's going to happen in the future, some words that are going to come out of the mouth of Al-Mustafa Al-Amin sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. And it's a statement that Allah Ta'ala mentioned, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. And the Rasul will say, O my Lord, verily my people have abandoned the Qur'an. O my Lord, verily my people, they have abandoned the Qur'an. They made hajr of the Qur'an. Hajr. Two ways that we can understand this ayat, showing the richness of the Qur'an. One way is the people of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It can mean the Quraysh, Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and the rest of the people who knew the Arabic language very well. They were eloquent. They were people who heard the Qur'an. They had a greater appreciation than all of Pakistanis in the world, all of the Asians in the world. Asians, they are not people who understand Arabic. So they grow up in their culture and they come to try to learn Al-Islam and learn Arabic and learn the Qur'an. Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, these people were not only Arabs and the Qur'an was revealed in their mother tongue, but they were intelligent people who knew the dynamics and the ins and outs of the Arabic language. So when they heard it, they rejected the Qur'an. So one of the meanings of the ayat is, O my Lord, my people of Quraysh, the kuffar, they abandoned the Qur'an. They abandoned the Qur'an. Allah has mentioned many ayats of the Qur'an describing to us the condition of Quraysh when they used to hear the Qur'an. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَلْغَوْا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَا تَسْتَمِعُوا لِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ وَأَلْغَوْا فِيهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَغْلِبُونَ. One ayat said, those people who disbelieve, they said, make noise when the Qur'an is being mentioned. When Muhammad is reading the Qur'an to you people, Quraysh, make a lot of noise and clamor. Beat on the desk, put your fingers in your ears and go, whoa, 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 whoa. Just make noise so that you will be the people who overcome the message of the Qur'an. And that's one of the many things that they used to do. There were some non-Muslims of Quraysh who, when they heard the Qur'an, and because of their Arabic language and their knowledge, when they heard the Qur'an, they were affected. And they said, this Qur'an is not from Muhammad. This Qur'an is not from the jinn. This Qur'an is not from human beings. Many of them embraced Islam, and some of them who remain enemies to Islam, they still acknowledge that this Qur'an is special. Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and the rest of them, they didn't even want to hear the Qur'an because they felt if they heard the Qur'an, they would be overwhelmed and overcome by what happened to some of the people who became Muslims when they heard it. So this is one of the many ayahs that go to show that the people of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the non-Muslims, they abandoned the Qur'an. The kuffar, that's one of the meanings. Out of all of the people who should have embraced the message of the Qur'an, it was the kuffar of Quraysh because they knew the language very well. They knew the language. They knew the language better than the Arabs of today who have PhDs in the Quran, in Arabic. Arabs today, some people you have people who know English, Spanish, Urdu, different languages. They're experts in the language and the poetry of the language and the history of the language, the literature itself. The people of Quraysh, they had a phenomenal expertise in comprehending the way the Arabic language was and is. So when they heard the Quran, they knew this is from other than Allah. It's a miracle in itself. So that's one of the meanings of the ayat, that Quraysh, they rejected it. The other meaning of the ayat, "Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran," is that his people include everyone sitting in the audience. Every Muslim here who has abandoned the Quran. And the abandonment of the Quran, it means a lot of things. There are over 40 interpretations of what is it to abandon the Quran. Some people, they have fallen into 2, 3, 4, 5 of these interpretations, as we're going to share with you. And some of us have fallen into all of the 40 interpretations of the abandonment of the Quran. It's the religious responsibility of every Muslim. He hears this ayat. It's his religious responsibility to first identify which one of these interpretations falls on him. And if it falls on him, he has to come out of it. So again, I want to repeat. Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. One meaning is Quraysh, his people, kuffar. The Nabi used to say, "Oh my people, say la ilaha illallah," the Quraysh. So that's one meaning. The second meaning, and what is more pertinent to us, is that the Muslims have abandoned the Quran. And there are 40 interpretations and meanings of abandoning the Quran. Before mentioning some of them, let me just say, the Quran, it has a lot of sciences connected to it. A lot of sciences. One of the meanings of abandoning the Quran, hajr. Hajr means abandonment, and this is the word that was used. Rabbi inna qawmi ittakhadhu hadha al-Quran mahjura. Mahjur means to abandon. Hajr. Like the person who makes hijrah. Hijrah is from this word. The Nabi says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, al-muhajir man taraka ma nahu Allahu anhu. The real muhajir, the one who really makes migration, is the one who has left. He has abandoned what Allah made haram for him. So the one who makes hijrah, he leaves the land, he abandons the land of disbelief, the land where he can't practice Islam, and he goes to the land where he can practice Islam. Muhajir is from this word, hajr, to abandon. The Prophet, he says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is showing the meaning of the word. He says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, لا يحل لمسلم أن يهجر أخاه فوق 3 أيام. It's not permissible for a Muslim to abandon his brother. He used the word hajr. Not permissible for him to abandon his brother for more than 3 days. So the point is, linguistically, oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. They make the Quran mahjur. It means to leave something. So one of the 40 interpretations of abandoning the Quran is not to study the sciences of the Quran. There are many sciences of the Quran. If you were to ask the average Muslim today, tell me 5 sciences of the Quran, ulum al-Quran. The average Muslim, unfortunately, many people they can't conceive. What do you mean, the ulum of the Quran, sciences of the Quran? What do you mean by the question itself? You ask the average Muslim, Amatullah, Khadija, Aisha, Fatima, come here. Abdullah, Ahmed, Bilal, come here. Name for me 3 sciences of the Quran. He doesn't know. She doesn't know. What are you talking about? That's one of the meanings of abandoning the Quran, not to study the sciences. From the sciences of the Quran is the tafsir of the Quran, is one of the many sciences. The meaning of those Qurans. Surah Al-Fatiha, guide us, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. What is the sirat al-mustaqim? What did the Nabi say the Sirat al-Mustaqim was? What did the Quran say the Sirat al-Mustaqim was? Sirat al-Ladhina an'amta alayhim, those ayats. What does it mean? The tafsir of those. Ayatul Kursi. What's the tafsir? That's one of the sciences. The people abandoned learning those sciences. Another science is a science that's called Asbab an-Nazul. The reason why the ayat or the surah was revealed. That's a science. If a person were to learn the reason why the ayat or the surah was revealed, they'll understand the meaning correctly. Our relatives in the Brahwis, our relatives from the Brahwis, who take the Quran and they want to show how the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is created from the nur of Allah, and they use ayat to prove that. They're not using those ayat with the correct reason why the ayat was revealed. That's just nonsense that they learn from their Malvi Sabs and their culture and their people. As for why the ayat was really revealed, the reason why it was revealed, that's a science. That there are reasons why many surahs were revealed. I give you an example. Asbab an-Nuzul is a science by itself. If you know the science, you'll understand correctly the meaning of the ayat. The Kuffar of Quraysh, they came and they said, Ya Muhammad, tell us about the ruh. Tell us about the ruh, the spirit in the human being. The Nabi said, I don't know. Allahu A'lam. He didn't have any information. He remained silent. And then some ayats were revealed. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّحِ قُلَ الرُّحْ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّكَ. They ask you about the spirit. Tell them the spirit is from the affairs of my Lord. And then on and on and on. Everyone here knows the first ayat that were revealed. اقرأ بِسْمِ رَبِّكَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ. What and why was that revealed? That's a science. The Nabi was in the cave of Hira. Jibril came to him and the ayats came down. Those first ayat. That is the science of Asbab and Nazul. And there are many ayat that have reasons that we know about. Many. So part of, oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran is, they don't study these sciences. And as I mentioned, there are many. From the sciences of the Quran is the science of the ahkam of the Quran. Those ayat that only deal with legislation, inheritance, getting married, getting divorced, only issues about legislation, that's all. It's not going to talk about Surah Al-Fatiha because there's no legislation in there. Qul huwallahu ahad, no legislation in there. It's going to talk about jihad, taking slaves, all of those issues. That's a science by itself. So one of the sciences that I want to make mention of is the science of the Quran called Al-I'jaz. Al-I'jaz. It's the science that is dealing with the miraculous nature of the Quran. That the Quran is a miracle. It's a science by itself. Most people don't have any idea. What are you talking about? Like if a person were to try to think out of the box and you say, what do you understand about the miraculous nature of the Quran? Did you know that that was a science? Most Muslims will say, no, I know that the Quran is a miracle, but it being a science by itself, I didn't know that. That's the meaning of the statement of the Nabi in this ayah. Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. They don't study the Quran and the sciences of the Quran. So one of the sciences is Al-I'jaz, the miraculous nature of the Quran. It's miraculous in the words. It's miraculous in its poetic style. It's miraculous in the syntax. But the reason why I want to bring this to your attention is that it's miraculous not only concerning the scientific information that's in the Quran, scientific information, many scientific realities that have become known way after the Prophet was here, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No way in the world he could have known about that. And he even said, "Ma min nabiyyin illa utiya min al-ayat ma amana alayha an-nas wa innama utitu al-Qur'an fa arju an akun aktharuhum tabi'an yawm al-qiyamah." He said there was never a nabi, no rasul, no nabi ever came except that he was given signs that would cause his people to believe in him. Musa had the ability to raise the dead. Isa gave life to the dead, and he did so many things. Every prophet, Suleiman, all of the prophets, they had miracles to set them apart and above from the charlatans and the soothsayers and all these other people, to show these people are really prophets inspired by Allah. Musa, when he brought those 9 signs, the frogs, the lice, split in the sea, his hand, all of that, any normal person, if he would have seen that, he would have said, I believe in the da'wah of Musa. Every Nabi, every Rasul was given signs. The Nabi said, I have been given the Quran as the biggest miracle. The Quran is a bigger miracle than him splitting the moon. The Quran is a bigger miracle than the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam opening his fingers and water coming out of his fingers in front of the people. Now, if we were to see that happen, the moon split, someone opening his fingers, and what we're going to say, whoa, this is big. The Quran is bigger than that. And yet, my people have abandoned the Quran. My people have abandoned the Quran. And we're going to come to some of the 40 interpretations of that. So concerning the miracle of the Quran, this ayah that we're dealing with today is a miracle of the Quran. That the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in the Quran, oh my Lord, my people, the Muslims have abandoned the Quran. How did the Nabi know sallallahu alayhi wasallam that the vast majority of his community will fall into many of these 40 interpretations of this ayah? Most of them, the Nabi complained to Allah, my people abandon the Quran. Most of them don't study the sciences of the Quran. Even those who consider themselves to be practicing Muslims, people from Ahl al-Hadith, people who are Salafi, people who are trying to be religious from whatever sect, TheOldbury's, Brelwis, Sufis, whatever sect that people are trying to practice, practicing Muslims don't study the sciences of the Quran. We have some of our brothers in this area, and I mention this to warn you brothers, let's not be like this. Brothers who will give a khutbah there in Birmingham about a science of hadith. It's called a jarh wa ta'dil, criticizing people. And this is a really important aspect of al-Islam. It preserved the hadith of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A person is talking about a jarh wa ta'dil. Who's on the sunnah, who's not on the sunnah, he's this, he's that. Some of our relatives, this is a description. Some of us are like this. He's like this, he's like that, he's like this. And then after the lesson, after the khutbah, he has to get someone to read the salat for him because he can't read himself. If you were to ask him about basic sciences of the Quran, there's a science of the Quran called an-nasikh wal-mansukh. Anybody know what does that mean? An-nasikh wal-mansukh. That's the science of the Quran. Now, my man. Now, there are ayats of the Quran that abrogated other ayat. Like, for an example, drinking khamr. In the beginning, it was permissible because the people were alcoholics. They used to drink a lot. So Allah didn't make khamr, sharab, haram just like that. After different ayat were revealed little by little, okay, don't drink khamr before salat, in khamr there's some benefit and there's some harm, but the harm outweighs the benefit. And then finally the ayat came down, don't drink anymore. There are many ayat like that, where something was allowed. In al-Islam, it was permissible at the beginning, it was permissible if a person became a Muslim, he became a brother to someone who wasn't really his brother. At the beginning of Islam, he's my brother, not by blood or biologically. If I die, he inherits from me. If he dies, I inherit from him. Then that was abrogated. That was because the Muslims were weak at one time. Muta'a marriage, to temporarily marry a woman. At the beginning, it was okay. And then it was abrogated. Shiites still practice that. If you don't know this science of abrogation, you'll go and marry a girl temporarily and say, it's in Bukhari and Muslim, it's in the Quran. No, it's in the Quran, but that's been abrogated. That's one of the many sciences of the Quran. Ali ibn Abi Talib was told, there's a man in the masjid who's teaching. Ali wanted to know whether he was competent. Ali wanted to know whether he was the man for the job. Ali ibn Abi Talib said, does he know the science of an-nasikh wal-mansukh? They said, no. He said, he's gone astray and he's leading others astray. don't allow him to speak in the masjid. Because if you don't know this science, again, a person can and will practice what is no longer established in the religion. So the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the sciences of the Quran, is the miraculous nature of the Quran. This ayat is from that. How did he know that the majority of the Muslims won't learn the Quran? How did he know that many Muslims who are practicing and they're students of knowledge, they'll put, before learning the Quran, they'll put learning a jarh wa ta'dil. They'll put issues about the sunnah, which is important. They'll put issues about the Arabic language. Some people are really committed and trying to learn Arabic, and that's important. But the very first science that a Muslim should engage himself in is the Quran. And that's because that was the sunnah of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those companions like Jabir bin Abdullah, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, the rest of them, they said, the Nabi used to teach us the istikhara, salat al-istikhara. He used to teach us al-istikhara the way he would teach us a surah from the Quran. So if something was important, they would say he would teach us this thing the way he taught us the Quran, because the Quran was the main thing. They said, khutbat al-haja, before you give the talk, in alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu. The companion said, the Nabi used to teach us this. Tell the people, learn this, learn this. He would say it for every khutbatul Jummah, every Eid. Anytime he wanted to address the people on Friday, he would say it over and over throughout the course of their lives. The companion said, he taught us khutbat al-haja the way he taught us a surah of the Quran, showing that the Quran was the main issue. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the Muslims at the beginning in Mecca, he said, anyone who wrote words of mine other than the Quran, erase those words. He didn't want the Quran to become mixed up with the Sunnah. At the beginning, he wanted the people to know the Quran. So he said, any of you companions, any of you who wrote the Quran, and you also wrote some of my words from my hadith, he said, erase the hadith, erase it. Only keep the Quran. And then later on, when many people came into Islam, many of them know how to read and write, he wasn't afraid of the Quran being mixed up with his words and the Sunnah. He allowed them to write. Everyone can write who had the ability to write. The point here is, that's an indication that the first thing that the Muslim starts off with is the science of the Quran. Aqeedah is important. It's the most important science in Islam. But Aqeedah comes from the Quran. What Allah said about himself, what he does, what he doesn't do, and so forth. The Sunnah and loving the Sunnah, that's important. That comes from the Quran because the Quran establishes that. So the first meaning that we want to bring to your attention that the Nabi was complaining about, my people have abandoned the Quran, is that most of them, unfortunately, the men and the women, the practicing and the irreligious, they abandon the Quran. They don't learn the Quran. They don't study the Quran. They don't understand. From the sciences of the Quran is its recitation, reading it right, reading it correctly. And I'm going to tell you guys, which brings us to the next point, inshallah. From abandoning the Quran, the second meaning of abandoning the Quran is, my people don't read the Quran. Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the recitation of the Quran. It is not a part of who the person is. It's not a part of who he is. Many days will go by and he or she will not pick up the Quran. It's not a part of who he is or who she is in the day. They're Muslims and they claim they love Islam. Inshallah, we all love Islam and we love Allah Azza wa Jal. But the Quran is the kalam of Allah. And in khutbat al-haja, the Nabi used to say, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the best speech is the speech of Allah. Inna khayr al-kalam, kalam Allah. The best speech is the speech of Allah. Not Abu Usamah's speech and not your speech. Not ghiba, lying, cheating. Not namima, talking about what's not my business. The TV, the music. That's not the best speech. The best speech is the speech of Allah. Just reciting it. Just reciting it. Just reciting it. If a person were to recite it, he's going to get a massive amount of rewards. Just reciting it. So when the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran," how did he know that the majority of the people were going to not read the Quran? When they read the Quran, it's going to be when Ramadan starts. When they read the Quran, it's going to be when they have a problem, and then they're going to go to the Quran. When they read the Quran, it's when they want to make a decision. He wants to know, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I invest? Should I not invest and pull out? Should I get married? Should I not get married? What should I name my child? So he opens up the Quran to read it. He opens it up and he just puts his finger right there, and then he names his child by the word that he found. What word did he find? Which word did he find? He just opened up the Quran. He says, whatever, if it's an even page or if it's an odd page, I'll determine by the ayat. Yes, I'll do it. No, I'll do it. Opens up the Quran. He puts his finger right there, and then he says, okay, I'm going to call my son Ayat. Ayat. Is that how you name? Is that when you connect yourself to the Quran? Read the Quran when? I want to put magic on someone. I want to take magic off of someone. I want to take magic. That's the only time I'm going to read it. As for I'm a Muslim, and part of my identity is being connected to reading the book of Allah, because in reading it are too many virtues. Look at some of the virtues of reading the book of Allah. Too many. Man qara'a harfa min kitabillah. Anyone who reads one harf, ABC, alif, ba, ta, he'll get 10 hasanat for each one. So if he reads alif, lam, mim, that's it. He gets 30 hasanat. Just walking home, walking in the street, driving his car, he reads Surah Al-Fatiha 7 times. Just recitation. Hasanat are going to be put in his book. Just simple, easy. Qul huwallahu ahad. He reads it 3 times. Qul huwallahu ahad is 1/3 of the Quran. If he reads it 3 times, it gets the reward of reading the Quran. All of it. But my people have abandoned the Quran. The Nabi says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ الْعَبْدِ إِذَا صَلَّى أَتَاهُ الْمَلِكِ فَقَامَ مِنْ خَلْفِهِ يَسْتَمِعُ الْقُرْآنُ وَيَدْنُو مِنْهُ وَلَا يَزَالْ يَسْتَمِعْ إِلَيْهِ وَيَدْنُو مِنْهُ حَتَّى يَضَعَ فَاهُ عَلَى فِيهِ فَلَا يَقْرَأْ آيَةٍ حَتَّى إِلَى فِي جَوْفِ الْمَلِكِ. He said, if the slave is praying and he starts to read the Quran, an angel, everybody, every woman, every man, if they start praying and they read the Quran, an angel comes behind him. And then the angel continues to get closer and closer and closer, listening to the Quran, until the angel puts his mouth on the mouth of the reciter, so the person reads the Quran inside of the insides of the angel. Some people will say, oh, what is that kalam, man? Angel got his mouth on my mouth? The people who think like that are the people who have low iman, who don't read the Quran. People who don't really know Islam. They look at the words of Allah and the words of the Prophet ﷺ from the prism of Western culture and kuffar, the way kuffar look at issues. You know, that kalam, the angel put his mouth on my mouth. Those stories are like Rumpelstiltskin, Goldilocks and the 7 wolves, the 4 bears, and you know, those kind of stories. No, the one who has iman, he read that Quran and he's connected to that Quran, and he saw all kind of miracles of what Allah created in the Quran, what happened in the Quran. He doesn't have a problem with an issue like that happening to a simple, easy person. The Nabi, he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which one of you would like to go to Buthan or Aqiq? That's where the camels used to be kept for sadaqah, zakat. This guy, he has to give 100 camels for zakat. That guy over there, he has to give 150. That guy has to give 1,000. That has to give 10. The zakat you used to have to give the Nabi the zakat. Camels, cows, sheep, money, gold, whatever. The Nabi used to keep the camel in a place called Buthan or Aqiq. He said, which one of you would like to go there every day and bring back 2 fat camels every day without committing any sins? They said, we all want to do that. He said, if you go to the masjid and you read 2 ayats of the Quran, it's better than bringing 2 camels. You read 3 ayats, better than 3. 4 ayat, better than 4. And as many ayats as you read. Person goes to the masjid and he just sits down, or he prays Surah Al-Fatiha, he reads those 7 ayat. After completing the salah, he reads those ayat. This hadith is applicable to him. This hadith is applicable to him. Just read it. The Nabi said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, مَجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ فِي مَا بَيْنَهُمْ إِلَّا نَزَلَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّكِينَةُ وَحَفَّتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ وَغَشَّتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ وَحَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِنْدُهُ. If people come together in the masjid and they read the Quran, when that happens, Sakina comes down, the Rahmah of Allah comes down, the Malaika come down and surround them, and Allah mentions them to those who are with them because they read the Quran. Allah said in Surah Al-Ahqaf, وَإِذْ صَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفَرًا مِّنَ الْجِنِّ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقُرْآنَ فَلَمَّا حَضَرُوهُ قَالُوا أَنصِتُوا فَلَمَّا قُضِيَ وَلَّوْا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِمْ مُنذِرِينَ قَالُوا يَا قَوْمَنَا إِنَّا سَمِعْنَا كِتَابًا أُنزِلَ مِن بَعْدِ مُوسَىٰ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ وَإِلَى طَرِيقٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Yeah, remember, Ya Muhammad, remember, when you were reading the Quran, there were a number of jinn who came down and they listened to the Quran. After they came and they sat, they said to each other, be quiet and listen to it. Be quiet. After you finished the recitation, they went back to their people and they started giving to the jinn da'wah ilallah. So the point here is the virtues of reading the Quran. How many people? When's the last time? Abdullah, I'm asking you guys. No one has to answer. When's the last time you picked up the Quran and read it? When's the last time? The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. One person, he read it earlier today. But the vast majority of the people, they didn't read it at all. Surah Al-Kahf. Whoever reads Surah Al-Kahf on Friday, a light will shine for him 7 days. What's that light? A light to help him to make decisions, a light of protection, a light of looking at the reality of things and so forth and so on. That's another meaning. They don't study and they don't read. Another meaning of my people have abandoned the Quran is they don't listen to the Quran. They don't listen to the Quran. They won't follow the sunnah of just sitting down and listening to the Quran. Just listening. Allah mentioned the people who listen to the Quran. الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلِ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ أُولَٰئِكَ هَدَاهُمُ اللَّهُ. Those people who listen to the statement, the Quran, and they follow the best of it. They listen. The kuffar, when they listen to the Quran, they say, make a lot of noise. Make a lot of noise. They would whistle. They would put their fingers in it, oh, and they would just make noise. They didn't want to listen. But Allah described those people who listen to the Quran. The Nabi said to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, it's the Sunnah. He said, Ibn Mas'ud, read the Quran for me. Read the Quran, Ameen. Ibn Mas'ud was surprised. Ya Rasulullah, should I read the Quran on you and it was revealed to you? The Nabi said, Inni uhibbu asma'ahu min ghayri. I love to hear it from other than me. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, I began to read Surah An-Nisa. That's what Ibn Mas'ud said. I began to read Surah An-Nisa, which goes to show that the surahs of the Quran had names during the time of the Nabi. This is Al-Fatiha, this is Al-Baqarah, this is Al-Imran, this is Nisa, this is Al-Ma'idah, this is Al-Mulk, and on and on. Ibn Mas'ud said, I started to read from the beginning of the surah until I came to the ayat, which was the 41st ayat of the ayat. It's the 41st ayat of Surah An-Nisa. He said, I came to this ayat, فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جِئْنَا مِنْ كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ بِشَهِيدٍ وَجِئْنَا بِكَ عَلَى هَؤُلَاءِ شَهِيدًا. The ayah said, how is it going to be, Ya Muhammad, Yawm al-Qiyamah, when we come to every nation that went before us, we're going to bring a witness over them, their prophets and their messengers, and we'll bring you as a witness over these people. Ibn Mas'ud said, when I read this ayat, the Nabi said, Hasbuka, stop. He said, I stopped and I looked up and the Nabi was crying. So the first point here is he listened to the Quran. It's the Sunnah. It's the Sunnah. From the benefits, as Al-Imam Al-Hafidh Ibn Hajar said, this hadith is Sahih Bukhari, he said, from the benefits of listening to the Quran, anyone who knows the Quran, anyone, it's the Sunnah of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to read the Quran on someone who knows it, that you read it so that someone above you can understand it. So someone above you can listen to your recitation. That's what used to happen with the Nabi. In Surah Al-Insan, Hal ata Al-Insan hin min ad-dahr, lam yakun shay'in madhkura. And this surah that the Nabi used to read on Friday at Fajr time, there is an ayah that tells us an incident that used to transpire between Rasulullah and Jibril. Jibril would come every Ramadan to the Nabi to tell him, read the Quran every Ramadan. The Nabi would read the Quran and he would complete the Quran in the month of Ramadan. So it is the Sunnah to complete in Ramadan. And the year that he died, Jibril came twice to make sure he had it. There was a surah that was revealed, some ayats from Al-Insan. Allah Ta'ala told the Prophet in these ayats, لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به إن علينا جمعه وقرآنه فإذا جمعناه فاتبع قرآنه. Don't move your tongue very quickly like that, Muhammad, to try to memorize it. We're going to bring it together, and when we do, then you follow it. Jibril used to read the ayat, and the Nabi would read very quickly, trying to memorize, showing, exerting energy. Allah told him, don't do that. Read it to Jibril easily. Take your time. So the Nabi read to Jibril, who taught him the Quran. Allamahu shadidul quwa. He was taught by one who was mighty and powerful, meaning Jibril. Jibril taught the Nabi the Quran. So the point here is, Ibn Mas'ud was asked by the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, read the Quran. Ameen. So one of the meanings of the Quran has been abandoned is that the people from this ummah don't listen to the Quran. If the Quran is being recited, people will talk over the Quran. Allah said in the Quran, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنِ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. If the Quran is read in your presence, then listen to it and be quiet in the hopes that you'll get benefit. You'll have mercy. We'll play the Quran and we're just talking over the Quran. The lady is free in her house. She's cooking. She's cleaning. She won't turn on the Quran. She'll turn the TV on. If given a choice, we're going to listen to the TV or the Quran, we'll listen to the TV. Right now, Islam channel and the different lectures that are going on. A phenomenon. That is, we have some famous poets, Muslim poets, and anashid. The anashid with music, those guys on Islam channel, all of them, that dude from South Africa, Rollins, all of those dudes, all of them, the music guys, put them on a side. Because the music is haram. I'm talking about the brothers who say anashid, poetry without music. Brothers like Muslim Bilal, brothers like Buna Muhammad, Hafidhahumullah. These brothers give poetry based on no music, just poetry. A lot of times what they say is nice, it's inspiring, inspirational. They'll come to lectures and they give their poetry. The youth, they'll listen to that stuff. They'll pay attention to that stuff. And that's okay, as long as what they say is correct. No problem. If you bring an expert of the Quran with a beautiful voice, and you say, okay, now the expert of the Quran is going to read, people will get up and go for intermission. People are not interested in sitting and listening to that. That's one of the meanings of this ayat that the Nabi mentioned. Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. They'll choose poetry over the Quran. Although in the Quran is a surah called Ash-Shu'ara, the poets. And Allah described the poets in that surah, the poets of Jahiliyyah, who used to say magnificent things and exaggerate. So I'm not against those brothers that I just mentioned their names. I'm not against them. Those brothers have a role to play in dawah. But the way that our youth are, the religious practicing Muslim girl or boy is the one who doesn't listen to music. They have an alternative to music, and that is Islamic poetry. It's okay. But the Nabi said the best kalam is the kalam of Allah. Why do we choose poetry over the book of Allah Azza wa Jalla? So we mentioned, I think, 3 issues now. Which 3 have escaped you? Abandoning the Quran, not studying the Quran. Abandoning the Quran, not reading the Quran. Doesn't read it, didn't study, didn't read it. Abandoning the Quran, not listening to the Quran. Instead, listening to music, wasting time watching music, listening to what's haram, and so forth and so on. Number 4. Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. It means they don't use the Quran as a medicine. They don't use the Quran as a medicine for themselves, their issues. Everybody here, without any exception, myself included, everybody here has medical issues. Some serious and severe, and some not so serious and not so severe. At-tadawi wa istishfa, using the Quran to get a cure. As Allah mentioned, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We revealed in the Quran what is a cure and a rahmah for the believers. The girl, my wife is not at the stage of menopause. She's not that old, so she has monthly cycles. The lady has cramps. She will never ever read the Quran to relieve the pain, ever. She'll take a Panadol, she'll take paracetamol before just reading the Quran, and it's free. The evil eye, magic, anxiety, depression, rheumatism, arthritis, a common cold, all of these issues. During the time of the companions, people were bitten by snakes, bitten by scorpions. People were majnoon. And I'm talking about majnoon. Majnoon, they tied the guy up in chains. The companion, Kharija ibn Salt, he said that he went to a group of people. They had a majnoon man tied up in chains so he wouldn't harm himself and he wouldn't harm others. Majnoon, his eggs were scrambled. He was majnoon. They tied him up so he wouldn't harm people and he wouldn't harm himself. Kharija ibn Salt came and read on him Surah Al-Fatiha 7 times. The man came out of his janoon. We have relatives who are majnoon. We have relatives who are in wheelchairs. Relatives who have special needs, handicapped relatives. Never ever did we sit to say Surah Al-Fatiha or Ayatul Kursi. We say call the doctor, go to the chemist. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's haram, but I'm saying the Quran is free. And when I say the Quran is free if you do it. If you go to the Malvi Sahib, he's going to charge you 200 pounds. He's going to charge you 150 pounds. Don't go to that guy. You yourself can do it. You yourself. Your little son, Ibrahim, he's only 7 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, 15. How old are you, brother? 9 years old. He knows Surah Al-Fatiha. Come. I'm not feeling well. I'm having panic attacks. The way I'm breathing, I'm having panic attacks. Read Surah Al-Fatiha. It's free. And it'll work bi-idhnillah. As I told you guys, people were bitten by snakes and scorpions during the time of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the companions read the Quran. So when the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam complained about his people, not about his people abandoning the Quran, she has bad eyesight, he has bad eyesight, has a toothache, has a headache, a nosebleed, the shoulder hurt, ripped muscle, this, that, back pains, whatever the issue is. He never ever thought about reading the book of, not once. That's the meaning of abandoning the Quran. Lastly, ikhwani, and like I mentioned, there are 40. Maybe next week we'll continue to do some more, I don't know. From the meaning of abandoning the Quran is people don't judge by the Quran. They don't judge by the Quran. They don't judge in their disputes. They don't judge in their differences. When we have these issues of the madhabs, when we have issues about our culture, the parents want to force the kid to get married, forced marriages. The child is saying to the parent, this is not from the religion. Don't do this. Allah said in the Quran, and He gives them ayats and so forth and so on. Allah said in the Quran, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَإِلَى الرَّسُولِ إِن كُنتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَحْسَنُ تَأْوِيلًا. If you people differ in anything, then refer it to Allah and His Messenger. Bring your differences. Look at the country of Somalia. Somalia is over 99% Muslims. The Somalians have destroyed and decimated their country, fighting amongst themselves, killing each other. They're in the World Book, the Guinness World Book, the Guinness Records, Records of Guinness World Books. What is it again? They're in that book for having the longest civil war known to mankind, 21 years. 21 years. And Muslims can't come together and say, I see it this way, you see it that way. Let's judge by the book of Allah. Some of you will sit there and shake your head and you say, man, that's messed up. We have ongoing problems and disputes with our relatives. 15 years, 20 years. We haven't spoken to each other. Okay, someone is right and someone is wrong. Someone is partially right, someone is partially wrong. Someone is wholly right, someone is wholly wrong. Let's bring this issue to the book of Allah, auntie, mother, father. Muslims, no. Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran. I'm Brewi, I'm TheOldbury. I'm Brewi, I'm TheOldbury. The Nabi is created from the nur of Allah. Hazar Nazar, Yarmi, Ilm al-Ghayb, all of that. Ya akhi, come to the book of Allah. No, that's not what my mother and father said. This is the way of the munafiqeen. They had a problem with judging according to the Quran. Allah mentioned in Surah An-Nisa about the munafiqeen. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ يَزْعُمُونَ أَنَّهُمْ آمِنُوا بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ يُرِيدُونَ أَن يَتَحَاكَمُوا إِلَى الطَّاغُوتِ ويريد الشيطان أن يضلهم ضلالا بعيدا وإذا قيل لهم تعالوا إلى ما أنزل الله وإلى الرسول a little man what are you doing? You move over a little bit because I'm about to jump on this guy right here. Move over. You get yourself together, okay? Sit and relax. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالُوا إِلَى مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَإِلَى الرَّسُولِ رَأَيْتَ الْمُنَافِقِينَ يَصُدُّونَ عَنْكَ الصُّدُودَ. Ya Muhammad, ya Muslims, do you not see those people who claim they believe in what was revealed to you and what was revealed before you in the Torah and the Injil? But in reality, they want to judge according to the Taghut. They want to judge in accordance to democracy. They want to, Taghut is the system other than what Allah revealed. The Muslim girl, she's been married to the guy 15, 20 years. There's a divorce. She wants alimony. She wants to take half of his property. Because that's the country she lives in. I've been with you for 15 years. I want half. Islam doesn't give you half. Judge by the book of Allah, sister. If you have children, he has to take care of those children. You don't have a haq to half of his property. They want to judge to the Taghut. And Shaitan wants to send them far, far away. And if you tell them, come, you'll see the munafiqeen running away from that request. The hypocrite. He doesn't want to be judged by Allah. The real Muslim, whether he's right or wrong. No one wants to be wrong. No one. But you're going to be wrong sometimes and you're going to be right. We have to try to be right the majority of the time. If it turns out that you're wrong based on the ruling, the real believer, even if he's wrong, he says, I hear and I obey. I was wrong this time. That's it. I was wrong. But some people, they don't ever want to be wrong. It's part of their arrogance. So the point here, Ikhwani, is the real Muslim doesn't have a problem with being judged by the book of Allah. Right or wrong, let the chips fall where they may. Whatever side of the equation I come out on, I'm not perfect, I don't want to be wrong, but if the Quran and the Sunnah deems that I was wrong, so be it. I'm ready to be judged. People are not like that. People have to be right by hook or crook. They lie, make up weak hadith, lie about the opponent, lie about their adversary, they exaggerate. Come on, Yahi, just put the cards on the table, the reality of it, and let those who know judge the situation from the Quran and the Sunnah. That's it. So one of the meanings, brothers and sisters, oh Allah, oh my Lord, my people have abandoned the Quran is, as individuals, we don't refer our issues back to the Quran to be judged. Our disputes between our relatives, our countries, will destroy the fabric of the family before we'll judge by the book of Allah. I'm going to judge based upon the ignorance of the village. The elders are always right. The elders. My family is higher than yours and we got more money than you and we've accomplished more than you. So you don't have a voice. What is that nonsense? That is judged by the justice of the Quran. There are some other issues, but we're going to stop here, inshallah ta'ala. Little man, you're still my little man. Alright? But you got to take it easy next time, because this is how you have to sit. You swinging your feet back and forth is okay. But having ants in your pants like that, we're going to put your pants on fire next time. Alright? Pants on fire, pants on fire. Okay, Akhwani, if you guys have any questions, you can put your questions across. Good question, Sheikh. There's an ayat of the Quran, Ikhwani, that says, none shall touch the Quran except those who are pure. Those who are pure. What is the meaning of this ayat? And does this ayat come under the realm of people abandoning the Quran? Yes, the ayat does come under the realm of people abandoning the Quran, but which realm? Oh my Lord, my people don't respect the Quran. They don't respect the Quran. Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, he was fasting and the people laid siege to his house and he was reading the Quran, although he memorized. But he loved to look in the Quran because the Nabi says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, man arada an yuhibbullaha wa rasuluhu falyaqra min al-mushaf. Anyone who wants to develop love for Allah and His Messenger, then read the Quran from the Mus'haf. So our mother Aisha, when Ramadan came, she would ask people, bring what you have written of the Quran. And she would start reading the Quran. And Imam Malik, he would teach in the Prophet's Masjid all year long. But in Ramadan, he would stop teaching and he would take the Mus'haf, although he memorized, and he wanted to read the pages of the Quran. So the Salaf used to read from the book of Allah. So part of the Quran being abandoned is to disrespect the Quran. Go to the masjid, our masjid in Green Lane. We have a robust Quran school. Somalis in Birmingham, I think they are the superior community in memorizing the Quran. Go to any masjid where there's a Quran class, and you will find in those Qurans the kids writing stuff inside of the Quran, drawing little men shooting guns, writing nasty things, inappropriate things. That's a part of abandoning the Quran. Taking the Quran and the child putting his feet. The Quran, the mother was reading the Quran and she sets it on the couch, on the settee, and she got up, she went somewhere. The child comes, or someone comes, a relative, a grown-up, and they sit on the Quran. A partial part of their buttocks sitting on the Quran. There's a religious book that has ayat of the Quran. It's on the floor and people put their feet on it. Newspapers with ayats of the Quran, religious newspapers. Like from Pakistan, Urdu, those newspapers, they have ayat. There's a religious section, fatwas or whatever. People put it on the floor and use it to eat on it. No respect for the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. As for it, none should touch it except they're pure, except the pure. The meaning of the ayat is that only the malaika in the heavens, when the Quran was revealed, Allah sent the Quran to the Law al-Mahfuz. He sent all of the Quran. He revealed it in the heavens, the Law al-Mahfuz. Everything is written there. And then Jibril would go there for a 23-year period. He would take parts of the Quran for 23 years and bring it down to the Nabi, according to what Allah told him to do. For 23 years. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. First ayats he brought. And the last ayat, al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. And then that was it. So Allah said, none should touch it in that place except the pure. It doesn't mean you and I, you don't have wudu, you can't touch the Quran. Doesn't mean that. And if you do touch the Quran without wudu, then you're disrespecting the Quran. Doesn't mean that. Aisha said about the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Kana yadhkurullah ala kulli ahyanihi." The Nabi used to mention Allah in all of his situations. In all of his situations. Going into the bathroom, coming out of the bathroom. He's about to have relationships with his wife. There's a dua to say. He doesn't have his clothes on, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for an example. That's what we have to do. We have to follow the sunnah. So you can mention Allah, but it's better to read the Quran with wudu. It's better. But if you read it without wudu, there's no dalil that that's bad. Didn't the Nabi write ayahs of the Quran on his letters? قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. Say, O people of the book, come to a common word between us and you, a common understanding that we shouldn't worship anyone but Allah, and that we shouldn't take each other as lords to be worshipped along with Allah. And he wrote those ayats to the kings. Those kings didn't have wudu. They were not Muslims. Not only that, Allah said in the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Your Lord was not forgetful. Allah knew in 2012 that Quran would be in the library. That Quran would be in the possession of someone who wasn't a Muslim and is interested in Islam. That Quran would be in the possession of enemies of Islam who want to read it to try to make doubt about the Quran. The Quran said, come and prove that it's wrong. Okay, they get the Quran, they read it, they don't have wudu. Allah knew people were going to do that. So when he said none should touch it except those who are pure, he would be contradicting himself. There are people who are touching it and they're not pure. So the meaning of the ayah is none shall touch it except those who are pure, meaning the malaika, they're the only ones who touch the Quran in the Lawh and Mahfuz. As for in the dunya, there are Muslims who are not pure, meaning they have najasa on them, they drink khamr, they don't make wudu, they don't make stinja, they have the Quran, they handle the Quran. But one of the meanings of abandoning the Quran is to disrespect the Quran, to disrespect it. Good question, Sheikh. My brother Jamal, my brother Ajmal, the most handsome, the most beautiful. Barakallah. The Nabi said Allah created everyone beautiful. He wanted me to make the point that I mentioned that the Prophet wrote letters. The Nabi was not the one who wrote the letter himself because he was unwritten, he was illiterate. As Allah mentioned in the Quran, الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الرَّسُولَ النَّبِيَّ الْأُمِّيَّ الَّذِي يَجِدُونَهُ مَكْتُوبًا عِندَهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. Those who follow the Rasul, the Nabi, al-Ummi, who was illiterate. the one who they found things written about him in the Torah and the Injil, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So he was ummi, he couldn't read and write, but he used to tell his companions to write for him. That's the meaning of my statement that the Nabi wrote letters to those kings. He had letters written to those kings. Any more questions, Ikhwani? I don't know, Allahu Alam. I don't know. I know the Lawh and Mahfuz is where the Quran and everything else is written, the Qadr and everything else. I will have to go back and read what the ulama said about this thing to talk with knowledge and what I can support and substantiate from the dalil. I would have to go back before I can comment about something like that. I can't say that both of them are synonyms and they're both the same thing because I don't know. I'll go back inshallah and I'll look that up because I don't want to misrepresent Allah's religion and I don't want to say that which I don't know, and I have no problem with saying I don't know, no problem. So I can go back and I can deal with that. Any more questions, Ikhwani? Good question, Nigel. The 40 interpretations. The 40 interpretations of 40 different meanings and possibilities of the meaning of this verse. Who does it? And how do we know it? What's the process of coming to those conclusions? They are understood by what is known in Arabic as al-istiqra. Istiqra means to exhaust something. When you take the Quran and you read it from the beginning to the end, that's istiqra. If you read the Quran from the beginning to the end, you come to realize that abandoning the Quran can mean this, and it can mean that, and it can mean this, and it can mean that. Because the Quran mentioned those who don't read it. The Quran mentioned those who don't listen to it. The Quran mentions, like I was given those proofs from the Quran and the Sunnah to support each interpretation. So who's the one who does that? Is it every Amr, Bakr, Zayd, every Tom, Dick and Harry, and Jack and John? No. Those people have knowledge and they know what they're doing. Someone will come and he gives his own interpretation. Abandoning the Quran, it means, for an example, something crazy, something that's absurd and ludicrous because his ignorance and the desires that he has motivated him to that understanding. So through the process of al-istiqra, reading something, the Quran, the Sunnah, from the beginning to the end, you come to realize all of these interpretations are plausible. All of these interpretations have been understood by the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They have been addressed by Allah and His Prophet, and those people have been endowed with knowledge. Now, if someone, my man Nigel, came with an interpretation that was just out in left field, again, we're going to reject that. We're going to say, for an example, if I come here, as some people do, they start talking and they start delivering lectures about something. It's just a load of nonsense. Prophet Muhammad never died. And they start reading verses of the Quran that don't support what they're saying. He starts giving points of view. Don't support what he's saying. We're going to reject that. Because the verse is being used out of context. The verse, the ayah, the hadith being used out of context. Because there are other verses that go against what you're saying. to show, no, you're wrong in what you're saying. So I love that question, Nigel. And this multiple interpretation goes to show the richness of the Quran. That this one thing can have all of those meanings attached to it. So in terms of this process of istiqra, how do we know? If I were to ask you guys, how many divisions of Tawheed are there? Anybody knows? How many divisions of Tawheed? How many categories of Tawheed? My man. 3. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. The monotheism of Allah in His Lordship. He's the Lord alone. Creator, sustainer, provider, makes the rain come down, takes care. Tawheed of worship. Only He should be worshipped. Dua to Him, slaughtering for Him, praying to Him, being afraid of Him. Tawheed of His names and His attributes. He's unique in His knowledge. The way He comes down, the this, that, He's unique. There's no ayat of the Quran and no hadith of the Nabi that says there are 3 categories. But if you read the Quran from the beginning to the end, you see the Quran and the Sunnah addressing and describing these 3 categories. The Lordship of Allah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. The fact that He has the right to be worshipped alone. Worship Allah alone and don't worship any other gods along with Him. His names and His attributes. Qul Allahu Ahad. There's no ayat or no hadith that says there are 3, but it's from reading from beginning to end that you're able to extrapolate and extract from the Quran itself, from the Sunnah, these 3 categories. And the issue about these interpretations are the same. They're the same. Good question, Nigel. Nigel, are you ready to become a Muslim today? All right. Are you sure? Because now, Nigel, you've been coming here for, I don't know, I think today is about the 4th month. And if a person is with the Muslims for 4 months, if they don't become a Muslim, we put them in a big pot and we burn them. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Nigel is my personal friend and our guest. All right. That's right. The dark meat tastes better than the light meat. You're right. You're right. But on a serious note, brothers and sisters, Nigel is our guest, and I'm impressed with the fact that he comes consistently and he asks questions and he's having these discussions and these debates, and he's an open-minded person. He came to Green Lane Masjid even for a number of the khutbahs. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to purify all of our hearts and our intentions, and that He makes it easy for us to make the correct decisions. My man, Harun. Now, can we learn the Quran from people who have incorrect aqidah, their belief systems are messed up? This is not an open and closed case. It depends on the variables, tafsil, the details that are going on. Usually, you should avoid taking knowledge from people of innovation. Usually, that's the general rule. Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, one of the main students of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him. He said about the Salaf, كانوا إذا أتوا الرجل يأخذ عنه العلم نظروا إلى صلاته وسمته وهديه. If they went to get knowledge from a person, before taking knowledge, they will look at his salat. They will look at his guidance. They will look at his character. They go and they meet the guy. He traveled from Khurasan. He traveled from Iraq. He traveled from Baghdad. He traveled from Egypt. He went all the way to Medina to take knowledge from this man. He wouldn't just go and sit in his lesson and start asking questions. He would make it his business to watch, how does he pray? Does he pray towards a sutra? Does he do raf'ul yadayn? Or is he a guy who's just praying very quickly and not giving salat its proper place? The Nabi says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, asraqu rajul alladhi yasraqu salatuhu la yatimmu ruku'aha wa la sujudaha. The biggest thief, harami, the biggest thief is the one who steals from his prayer. He doesn't make ruku properly. He doesn't make sajda properly, bowing and sajda. He's very quick. He's stealing from his salat. He's worse than the guy who steals from the bank, steals inheritance and stuff. He's worse. So those salaf will look and say, how is he praying? Because if he's not given the correct attention to prayer, he's not trustworthy to give me knowledge. He may lie on the Nabi. He may put false hadith in there. He may, whatever, take advantage of me. And they used to look at his hadith. How did he drink with his right hand? Did he give with his right hand? Was he musbil? How was he? And they would look at his guidance. Was he generally a guy who, his behavior, how was he? So we normally shouldn't take knowledge from people of innovation. But if a person finds himself in an environment at a particular time or a place in which knowledge is scarce, and the only people who are providing the service and the acquisition of a particular form of knowledge, he's the only one who can teach you the Quran correctly, then it's permissible to take knowledge from him with conditions. One condition is he's not teaching you his filth and his innovation. If he's teaching you that and he's going to share that, don't go. It's not permissible to go. You have to avoid it. Another condition is he's the only guy who can give it. If you have someone else who can give it, he may not be as prolific as that individual, as expert as that individual, is less, but it's better than putting yourself in harm's way. So we can't say it's permissible open-ended, it's haram open-ended. It depends on the situation. It depends on the situation. But the general rule is, don't take knowledge from people of innovation. Don't take knowledge from people of innovation. Don't take knowledge from ignorant people. Don't take knowledge from the person who's a liar. And don't take knowledge from the individual who he is not able to distinguish for you, and he's not able to give you the beneficial stuff. You don't know what's coming from him, if it's beneficial or harmful. And Allah knows best.
Okay, last question. We've just gone over Zaid.
If you read or listen to the Quran, do you still get the same reward? Do you understand what's said? Second part.
If a person reads the Quran and the person understands the Quran, they're not equal. Understanding the Quran is the goal and the objective. And the one who understands is not like the one who simply reads. Because Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran has criticized the condition of the Yahud in Surah Al-Jum'ah. He mentioned in that ayah in Surah Al-Jum'ah that the Prophet used to read as well, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for the Jum'ah prayer, for the Fajr prayer of Jum'ah. مثلهم كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. The example of those Jews who had all of the books, the Torah and all of that information, is like the example of the donkey who just has books on his back. You have that recitation, the ability to read, and you have those books on your back, but you don't understand, you don't comprehend what's in the book. What's in the book is to follow the laws of the Old Testament. Follow what Musa said. Follow what the prophets and them said. Don't sell your religion for a miserable price. Be examples to the world today. Allah sent to you all of those prophets and messengers. You should be a beacon of light and an example for every other group of people who have not been sent to all of those prophets and messengers. Zechariah, Yahya, Yaqub, Yusuf, all of those prophets and messengers, and look how you people are behaving. You're from the worst of the people and the oppression that you're putting out on other people in the whole world, not just in Palestine. And that doesn't mean all Jews. So Allah, He criticized the people who just read. They have books, that's it. As for the ones who know and comprehend, Allah said in the Quran, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Are they equal, those who know and those who don't know? Those who know are not like those who don't know. لَا يَسْتَوِيَانِ مَثَلًا. The two examples are not the same. The two groups are not the same. So the goal and the objective in the final analysis, and we'll mention this I think next time inshallah, is to understand the Quran And then there's the third level, to apply the Quran, to practice the Quran. So the person who understands but he doesn't practice is a problem. So reading it, it has its virtues, no doubt. But also the practicing it, understanding it is also. We have that brother that he put his hand up. We don't want to cut him off. Not you, before you, that brother right there. Sorry about that. No. We have Harun al-Rashid. Then the brother behind Harun, what's your name? And then the one behind you, what's your name, little man? Isa. And then the one behind Isa, he had his hand up. Asif. Alaikum salam. Oh, that guy had another question to that first question, right? Sorry about that, my man. I'm hungry. Go ahead. The translation? No other language is going to render the true meaning of the Quran. No language. One of the languages that's very strong in its ability is the Urdu language. But even the Urdu language doesn't have the ability to render the true deep meaning of the Quran. And that's why you find many people today, when they want to read, they read an ayat and they say the interpretation of that is this and this and. They don't say Allah said. And I think that's better. I don't do that. But if a person says Allah said in the Quran and then he translates, it's better to read the ayat and say, and the interpretation of that, in the best of my ability, that. So no language is going to render the real meaning of the Quran. But you do the best that you can. We do the best that we can. Go ahead, Asif.
In my community, a lot of people, you spoke about the Quran being a cure for illnesses and diseases. A lot of people wear the Quran with the claim that it's parts of the Quran around the extra protection from magic, from depression, etc. Does that have any validity?
There are some bona fide scholars who are of the opinion that it is permissible to wear a tamima, a ta'weed, with the Quran written in it or on it. But that position is weak and is da'if because, number one, none of the companions ever did that. Not a single one ever did it. And if it was beneficial, fruitful, then they would have preceded us to it. Number two, we have from the Sunnah that which shows it shouldn't be done. The Nabi made dua against people like that. He told the people, "Man allaqa tamimatan fala atammallahu lahu." Anyone who wears this amulet, may Allah not complete his affairs. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the man, if you die with that thing on you, you'll die as a mushrik, a polytheist. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in authentic hadith, "Inna ruqa wa tama'im wa tiwala shirk." General hadith. He said certain types of ruqya and the tamima and love potions are shirk. He said all of tamimas are shirk. And he didn't make a distinction between Quran and not Quran. So it should be totally avoided and abandoned. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.